Right then, let's get our boots on and step back in time. Imagine a world without cars, trains, or aeroplanes. It seems impossible, doesn't it? But for ancient people, this was their reality every single day. The need to move from one place to another was absolutely fundamental to their survival and the growth of their communities. It wasn't about popping to the shops for a pint of milk. It was about finding new hunting grounds, seeking out fertile land for farming, or escaping from enemies. Travel was often a tough, dangerous business, but it was the very engine that drove human history forward, pushing people over hills and across valleys to discover what lay beyond the horizon. Before any fancy inventions, the primary mode of transport was the oldest one in the book, our own 2 feet. For thousands of years, walking was the only way to get anywhere. People would walk for days, even weeks, following animal trails or the course of a river. They carried everything they owned on their backs, from tools and weapons to food and water. This kind of travel built incredible endurance and a deep, intimate knowledge of the landscape. Every stream, every rock formation, every forest was a landmark on a mental map passed down through generations. It was slow, grueling work, but it allowed early humans to spread across the entire globe. Think about the sheer scale of it. Early hunter-gatherer groups were nomadic, meaning they moved constantly to follow the herds of animals they relied on for food. This wasn't just a casual stroll. It was a life-or-death migration dictated by the seasons. Later, as the first villages and towns began to sprout up, people still had to travel. They needed to find specific resources that weren't available locally, like good quality stone for making tools, salt for preserving food, or clay for making pottery. This need for resources was the first spark that would eventually ignite the vast networks of trade that defined the ancient world. So the basic human need to survive, find food, and gather resources created the demand for transportation. But it was also about something more: curiosity and connection. People wanted to know who lived in the next valley. They wanted to trade stories, share ideas, and form alliances. This desire to connect with other groups was just as powerful a motivator as the need for food. Every long walk, every journey, was a thread weaving communities together, slowly creating the complex tapestry of society. It all started with a single step, driven by the most basic and powerful of human instincts. Walking was all well and good, but you can only carry so much. The real game changer for land travel was the domestication of animals. Suddenly, people had a new source of power. Donkeys, oxen, and later horses and camels became our first vehicles. These weren't just for riding. They were primarily used as pack animals, or what we call beasts of burden. A single donkey could carry far more than a person, freeing up human hands and energy. This meant people could transport more goods, travel further, and establish more permanent settlements because they could bring supplies in from a distance. It was a brilliant bit of teamwork between humans and animals. Then came one of the most important inventions in all of human history, the wheel. You see it everywhere today, but just imagine the moment someone first figured it out. The earliest evidence we found for wheeled vehicles comes from Mesopotamia and Eastern Europe, around 3500 BC. These weren't sleek, speedy chariots at first. They were heavy, solid wooden discs attached to an axle, pulled by a pair of lumbering oxen. The first carts and wagons were slow and clumsy, often getting stuck in the mud. But my word, they were revolutionary. They could haul massive loads of grain, stone, or timber that would have been impossible for pack animals alone. For the ordinary person, land travel was still a pretty rough experience. Most people couldn't afford a horse or even a donkey, so they walked alongside the merchants' caravans or the noblemen's procession. The roads, if you could even call them that, were often little more than dirt tracks. They were muddy in winter, dusty in summer, and always bumpy. A journey of just a few dozen miles could take several days. Travelers had to worry about bandits hiding in the forests, wild animals, and simply getting lost. It was an adventure to be sure, but a very uncomfortable and dangerous one for most. The wealthy, of course, had a completely different experience. A rich merchant or a powerful noble would travel in style. They might ride a fine horse with a comfortable saddle, or, in some cultures, be carried in a litter, a sort of portable couch held up by servants. For longer journeys, they would have sturdy wagons to carry their luxurious belongings, from fine clothes to tents and cooking equipment. They traveled with guards for protection and servants to make the journey as pleasant as possible. For them, travel was less about survival and more about demonstrating their power and status to everyone they passed on the road. Land travel had its limits, especially when you came to a wide river or, even more daunting, the sea. So, what do? You build a boat. The very first boats were probably simple log rafts, made by lashing bundles of reeds or logs together. These were fantastic for crossing rivers or fishing in lakes. In places like ancient Egypt, the River Nile was the main highway, and simple reed boats, like the ones you see in their tomb paintings, were used by everyone. They were easy to build and perfect for floating downstream with the current. This simple technology opened up entire new worlds for exploration and trade. From these humble beginnings, boat-building technology slowly became more sophisticated. People learned to hollow out massive logs to create dugout canoes, which were more stable and could carry more cargo. Then came the invention of the sail. What a moment that must have been. Instead of relying on muscle power from paddling or the river's current, you could harness the power of the wind. This meant you could travel faster, go further, and even travel against the current. Early ships, like those built by the Phoenicians or the Greeks, combined sails with rows of oarsmen, giving them power and maneuverability on the open Mediterranean Sea. For the average person, a journey by water was often as a passenger or a rower on a merchant vessel. Imagine being an oarsman on a Greek trireme, a warship with 3 banks of oars. It was backbreaking, repetitive work in a cramped, smelly space. On a merchant ship, you might be crammed in with the cargo, exposed to the weather, and living on basic rations of hard biscuits and water. Sea travel was at the mercy of the elements. Storms could appear with little warning, sinking ships and taking everyone on board down with them. Seafaring was a risky business, full of superstition and a healthy fear of the gods of the sea. The experience for a wealthy passenger was naturally much better. A rich Roman official sailing to a province like Egypt would have his own cabin on a large grain ship. While not exactly a luxury cruise liner, it offered shelter and privacy. He would bring his own slaves, food and wine to make the journey comfortable. These larger ships were more stable and safer than smaller coastal vessels. They were the lifeblood of empires, connecting distant lands and ensuring that goods, soldiers and administrators could move across vast bodies of water, holding the ancient world together in a web of maritime routes. Transportation wasn't just about moving people. It was about moving goods and ideas. Let's look at the Romans. They were master engineers, and they understood that to control a vast empire, you needed fantastic roads. They built over 50,000 miles of straight, paved roads, connecting Rome to the furthest corners of its territory, from Britain to Syria. These weren't just dirt tracks. They were properly engineered with foundations, drainage, and a paved surface. This network allowed legions to march quickly to trouble spots, administrators to deliver messages, and crucially, for trade to flourish. Carts laden with Spanish olive oil or British tin could trundle all the way to Rome. Now, let's sail across the Mediterranean to ancient Egypt. Here, the Nile River was the ultimate superhighway. The river's current flowed north towards the sea, so boats could just float downstream with their cargo. But cleverly, the prevailing wind blew from the north, so they could raise their sails and travel south, against the current. This perfect natural system made transportation incredibly efficient. Huge barges, built from cedar wood imported from Lebanon, carried massive stone blocks from quarries in the south to build the pyramids and temples in the north. The Nile unified Egypt and made its monumental architecture possible, all thanks to simple, effective water transport. This movement of people and goods created a more connected world. A person in Rome could eat bread made from Egyptian wheat, drink wine from Gaul, and season their food with pepper from India. This was all made possible by long and often dangerous journeys by land and sea. But it wasn't just goods that traveled. Ideas, religions, technologies, and stories spread along these same routes. The Greek alphabet, for instance, was adapted from the Phoenicians, a seafaring people. This exchange of culture was just as important as the exchange of goods, shaping societies in profound ways. In the end, the story of ancient transportation is the story of human ingenuity. From the simple act of walking to the complex construction of a seagoing vessel, every development was a solution to a problem. How do we cross this river? How do we carry more grain? How do we get our army there faster? Travel for the ordinary person was tough and dangerous, while for the rich, it was a display of status. But for everyone, it was the essential force that built cities, fed empires, and connected diverse cultures, laying the very foundations of the world we live in today. It's a powerful reminder that history isn't static. It's always